The evening air was heavy with the scent of rain as Sarah raced down the slick sidewalk, her ballet bag bouncing against her side. The world around her was a blur of muted streetlights and the distant hum of cars, but she was oblivious to everything except the thrill of the day ahead. She had been practicing for months for a prestigious audition in the city. Her one shot to make it. Her dream of performing on grand stages was within reach. The dance studio's polished wooden floors and mirrored walls had become her world, and for once, it felt like all the years of sweat, tears, and sacrifice were about to pay off. She could already picture herself in the spotlight, twirling, the crowd roaring with applause. She had worked harder than anyone else. It was her moment. As Sarah rounded the corner, her foot caught the edge of the curb, and time seemed to freeze. For a brief, terrible moment, she was airborne, her body twisting in an unnatural arc. The next thing she knew, the ground rushed up to meet her, her ankle slamming into the pavement with a sickening crunch. The pain exploded through her like fire, sharp and unrelenting. She gasped for breath, her body trembling. Her world tilted, everything spinning into a haze of panic and confusion. For a moment, she didn't even understand what had happened. She looked down at her leg, but the sight was too much to process. The angle at which her foot turned was impossible. It wasn't just pain, it was wrong, grotesque, like her body had betrayed her. She struggled to push herself upright, her hand pressed against the wet ground, but her leg wouldn't move the way it should. Tears burned her eyes, mixing with the rain that had started to fall more heavily. The reality of it all began to settle over her like a suffocating weight. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her breath came in ragged gasps. She could hear her mother's voice in her head, telling her to stay calm, to never give up. But how could she stay calm when everything she had worked for seemed to be slipping away with every agonizing throb of pain? It was only when the ambulance arrived that she realized just how serious it was. The paramedics tried to comfort her, but the words felt distant and hollow. She wasn't listening anymore. She was already inside her own head, already imagining how her life was about to change. The hospital room was sterile, cold. Sarah lay in a bed, her leg elevated, a thick cast wrapped around her foot and ankle. The injury wasn't just a fracture, it was a break, the kind that would take months to heal. Maybe longer. And even then, the doctors weren't hopeful. Ballet was not a forgiving art. The delicate precision, the agility required. Sarah's ankle, even once healed, might never allow her to move the way she used to. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand. Her face was a mask of quiet concern, but there was something in her eyes that Sarah couldn't bear to look at, an expression of helplessness, of deep, gnawing sadness. It was the same look Sarah had seen in her father's eyes when he tried to pretend everything was fine during the hardest times. They didn't say much. There was no need. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words and shattered hopes. Her mother kept glancing at the door, as if expecting her father to walk in. But he didn't. The hours dragged on, each one a slow, suffocating reminder of what Sarah had lost. She tried to focus on the ceiling, on anything other than the pit in her stomach that refused to let go. There was no way to make it go away. Not with a smile, not with a shrug, not with any amount of hope. When the doctor returned with the news, the finality of his words felt like a blow. "I'm afraid this is more serious than we anticipated," he said, carefully choosing his words, but they landed like bricks in her mind. The road ahead would be long and filled with uncertainty. He talked about physical therapy, about recovery, about the possibility of a return to normal life. But none of it mattered. Ballet, the thing that had given her life meaning, was now a distant dream. Later that night, when Sarah was alone in her room, she couldn't stop herself from crying. She hadn't let herself feel it in front of her mother, not when she was trying to stay strong. But now, in the privacy of her bed, with the sounds of the hospital outside her door, she couldn't hold back the grief. The sobs shook her body, raw and uncontrollable. Her dream, her entire future, had been yanked away in a single instant, and she had no idea how to put the pieces back together. Through the fog of her tears, she realized just how much she had tied her identity to dance. Without it, who was she? What was left? For the first time in her life, Sarah felt utterly lost. In the days that followed, she was forced to confront the unthinkable. That ballet, the thing she had lived for, was gone. She started therapy, but it wasn't the same. No amount of stretching or strengthening would bring her back to the bar, to the graceful movements that had once defined her. Every step she took, every movement she made, was a cruel reminder of what she would never be able to do again. Her mother still tried to be supportive, but there was a growing distance between them. She couldn't bring herself to understand what Sarah was feeling. Not completely. She tried to offer words of comfort, but they always seemed so empty. No one could understand the depths of the loss, not really. And then it started, the quiet isolation. The friends who had once admired her talent began to drift away, unsure of how to handle the new version of Sarah. The invitations to events stopped coming, and the world she once knew started to feel like it belonged to someone else. Everyone else. She was left to pick up the broken pieces of herself, and there was no one to tell her how to do it. It was only when she stood at the edge of the stage during the final rehearsal for the spring showcase, her last chance to prove she could still be part of the world she loved, that she understood. The music played, the dancers moved, but all she could do was watch, standing there on the sidelines. Her world, once so full of promise and hope, had crumbled before her eyes, like shattered glass that would never be whole again. The weight of Sarah's injury bore down on her family like an unseen force, pulling them apart in slow, painful increments. Her mother, Mary, tried to keep up appearances, pouring her energy into caring for Sarah. But Sarah could see the changes in her mother. The way her shoulders hunched, the way her eyes grew distant when they used to be filled with quiet strength. She wasn't just her caretaker anymore. She had become someone who was lost too. In the weeks after the accident, their home, once bustling with energy, grew quieter. There were fewer conversations, fewer shared moments. The laughter and warmth that had filled their small house were now replaced by the sound of distant footsteps, the occasional clink of dishes, and the occasional hushed argument between Mary and Sarah's father, Paul. Paul had always been the one who held the family together. He had worked long hours as an engineer, often coming home late, but there was always time for Sarah when she needed him. He'd been proud of her determination and ambition. But after the accident, something in him broke too. He couldn't hide it the way Mary tried. His disappointment was written on his face. It wasn't just the loss of Sarah's dream. It was the realization that everything he had worked for, the plans he had made, were crumbling in front of him. He had always imagined Sarah going to a prestigious dance academy, the way he had imagined a bright future for her. Now, he didn't know how to cope with what was left. It wasn't long before he stopped coming home early. The tension in the house was thick with silence. When he did return, it was as though he was just a body moving through the motions of daily life. He didn't ask Sarah about her therapy. He didn't sit with her and try to find out what she needed. He was absent in a way that was even worse than physical distance. One evening, Sarah overheard an argument that would shatter the illusion of their family's strength once and for all. She had been sitting in the living room, trying to focus on her homework, when she heard the sharp edge of her father's voice, raised in frustration. Her mother's soft, pleading tone followed, but it was too quiet for Sarah to make out the words. Then the unmistakable sound of something breaking, glass shattering against the floor, made her stomach churn. She rushed to the kitchen where her father stood, his face red with anger. He had thrown a glass, the shards of it now scattered across the floor. Her mother was standing frozen, her hand pressed against her mouth, as if trying to contain the pain.
I can't keep doing this, Mary. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. This thing with Sarah, it's like a weight around my neck. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix her.
Sarah felt her heart break at the rawness in his voice. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It was hopelessness. Her father wasn't angry at her, not directly. He was angry at life, at the unfairness of it all. And his anger was a torrent, flooding the room with a kind of pain that no one knew how to navigate. Mary, who had always been the rock in their family, the one who held everything together, now looked small, fragile. She lowered her hand from her mouth and whispered, her voice barely audible.
"What do you want me to do, Paul? I don't know how to make it better. I don't know what to do either."
Sarah's heart dropped. She wanted to scream, to say that they didn't need to fall apart, that they could work through this together. But she knew it wasn't that simple. It was too late. The cracks in their family had already started to widen, and no amount of love or effort could fill them completely. She quietly stepped back, retreating to her room as the shattering glass on the floor echoed in her ears. The next few months were a blur of hospital visits, physical therapy sessions, and quiet dinners where no one spoke. Sarah tried to focus on getting better, on regaining some sense of normalcy, but it was clear that the emotional distance between her parents had grown too wide to ignore. There were nights when she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing her father's footsteps leaving the house late into the night. He had started working longer hours, telling her mother that there was a new project at work, but it was clear to Sarah that he was avoiding the home. He couldn't handle the sadness in the house anymore, and maybe he couldn't handle her. In the middle of one of these silent evenings, Sarah overheard another conversation between her parents, this time from the hallway. She had been trying to sleep, but their voices pierced through the thin walls, each word laced with a sorrow that was almost too heavy to bear.
Maybe we need to think about what's next, Mary.
Paul's voice was quieter this time, resigned.
I can't stay here, in this house. It's too much. The constant reminders of what we've lost. What she's lost.
His words trailed off, but the pain in his voice was unmistakable. Her mother's response came slowly, as if she too had been holding on to the same truth for far too long.
"I don't know how to let go either, Paul. But I can't make you stay."
There was silence. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, Paul muttered,
"Maybe it's time for me to go. We're both drowning here, Mary. And I don't think either of us knows how to save the other."
The next morning, when Sarah found her father's suitcase by the front door, her world tilted. Her mother was in the kitchen, her back turned as she prepared breakfast, her movements mechanical. Sarah stood in the hallway, unable to process what she was seeing. The reality of it hit her like a wave, washing over her in one cruel rush.
"Dad?"
Her voice was small, but it felt like an echo in the empty house. Her father turned slowly, his face a mask of resignation.
"I'm sorry, kiddo. But I can't be here anymore."
There was no anger, no fight left in him, just a hollow apology and a finality that ripped through Sarah. Her mother, who had been pretending to be strong, finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for him, but it was too late. Paul was already halfway out the door, his hand gripping the suitcase handle like a lifeline.
"I can't fix this, Mary."
He said quietly, his voice breaking.
"And I can't fix her either. I don't know how to be here anymore."
And with that he was gone. In the weeks that followed, Sarah watched her mother's quiet grief consume her. Mary's movements became slower, her expressions more distant. She wasn't just mourning the loss of her husband, she was mourning the loss of their family, the family they had once dreamed of. But there were no more dreams now, just the hollow reality of a broken home. Sarah too had lost something that day, not just her father but a sense of what it meant to be part of a family. The silence between them now was deafening, a constant reminder of everything that had been lost, not just her own dream, but the dream of a whole, loving family that had once been. And as the days went by, she wondered if they would ever find a way to put the pieces of their broken lives back together, or if, like her shattered dream, they were simply beyond repair. Months passed since the accident, and Sarah was now navigating a world she no longer recognized. She had traded the bright lights of a potential dance career for the muted gray of a desk job and endless days of therapy. The dreams that had once been so vivid, painted in broad strokes of grand stages and standing ovations, now felt like distant echoes, lost to the world she had no choice but to live in. Her body, which had once flowed effortlessly in ballet's perfect form, now seemed foreign to her. The way her ankle twisted in physical therapy, the crutches she used to get from one place to another, felt like constant reminders of what she would never be. But even more painful than the physical recovery was the mental battle she fought every day. Sarah could still remember the crisp sound of her shoes against the polished dance studio floors, the feel of the bar beneath her hands, the rhythm of her body as it moved through pirouettes and arabesques. Now, every movement felt like a betrayal of her former self, a ghost of the girl she used to be. It was in these moments of intense loneliness that she started to lose touch with everyone. Her friends, once so supportive, began to fade into the background. They didn't know how to help her, not really. The invitations to lunch or weekends out dwindled. They had their own lives to live, and Sarah's silence, her refusal to talk about what she was going through, only pushed them further away. One evening, she found herself alone at the coffee shop where she worked, cleaning tables after closing time. The bell over the door jingled as a late customer walked in,